Hi everybody, and welcome to my latest Raid Observer interview. This time I'm speaking with some of the guys from the EU Raiding Guild Method. Method's been ranked in the higher echelons of raiding for many tiers now, and with their best ranking being about a world number 2. This achievement has meant that Method has not only developed a self-admitted and arguably justifiable elitist attitude about the quality of their guild and their outlook and ability with regards to raiding, but it's also garnered them a lot of attention from the raiding community itself and the media as well. So they've been doing radio interviews and articles, getting advertising and sponsorship, enjoying a following through live streaming and being the center of jabs, jokes and adoration from the raiding community, and even getting invited to BlizzCon and other gaming events. I'd say these are experiences that most regular raiders from regular guilds can't really relate to, but I suppose that's life and Method. But Method is more than just the sum of what we might see from the outside. It's also a group of guys that are mostly in their 20s, who like a good laugh and have plenty of inside jokes, occasional guild dramas, a fierce love of gaming, and maybe more than their mothers and girlfriends would like them to have. And they have regular lives. Quite a few are university students, some hold down regular jobs, others are juggling both. And add in personal lives and the fact that you have to show up for raids and do your job, I'd say the guild doesn't sound so different from anyone else's. So Method isn't either or, they're both. And that's why I often love talking with them. It's an engaging group that's into the game, wants to win, and likes to do it. And despite their openness about feeling elitist, I wouldn't call them annoyingly arrogant or anything like that. In fact, I'd have to say that they're some of the smartest guys I've ever had the pleasure to interview. And I'd have to say that quite a few of my earliest findings and those aha moments about the relationship that raiders have with the experience of raiding, for example, came out of my very animated group interviews with Method. I first met Method about a year ago. I'd been approaching different top-level raiding guilds to get their perspective into raiding and how they maintain high levels of success over prolonged periods. And Method stood out to me at the time as they were one of the dominant multinational EU guilds on the top of the scene. I'd originally become interested in doing my doctoral research into raiding primarily because of these multinational raiding guilds and their geographical dispersion and multilingual perspectives. I mean, how can it be that players from dozens of countries can get together, use one language in common, and cooperate on solving complex problems like difficult boss encounters? And consider all those varying cultural backgrounds and different sort of societal norms. And I'd say this topic still very much fascinates me, even though it isn't quite the core part of my research as it was at the beginning. And I have to say I also learned that while fascinating and capable of presenting its own unique challenges when you put a group of people from so many different places together, this really wasn't a foremost concern for these guys in particular. At the end of the day, competing was their number one interest. They were capable of zooming out and thinking about how cool it was that things like the internet, technology, and progresses in language and education had enabled something that would have been unheard of even 20 years ago, such as a guild like theirs. But I'd say they preferred to remain zoomed in and focused on the task of raiding and on the task of trying to win. So when I do my group interviews with the guys, they were always these somewhat Mad Hatter-esque banter sessions combining chaos, jokes, seriousness, insight, intelligence, and openness. I always left the 2-hour sessions on TeamSpeak feeling kind of educated, fascinated, elated, and often quite confused. And I really wanted to replicate that feeling for this raid observer, and I kind of think I did. We had no set questions, and I did my best to retain all of the content. I only removed any disruptive audio blips in the recording or parts that were hard to hear. Unfortunately, we did lose parts of what Treckie was saying due to his mobile broadband. And I honestly have to say, how that guy raids as well as he does with the internet situation he has defies my understanding. So this series is in 3 parts. The first 2 are mostly about the experience of raiding in Tier 13 and what it's been like to welcome a lot of new raiders from some of the recently collapsed guilds like Inner Sanctum, Carfagan and Insidia. And the last part is where we get a bit silly and I ask them random questions that like to ask serious raiders. Anyway, do enjoy and have fun getting to know Method, at least through the eyes of Hentrenson, Padmay, Phlaryu, Treckie and Valiane. Hi everybody and welcome back to another Raid Observer interview. I have members of the Raiding Guild Method with me. Tonight we're going to look at a few issues that have affected this particular guild and their perspective on how raiding's been in general, and also the forecasts for raiding ahead and down the road. So without further ado, I'll dive right in. I'm going to go alphabetically. I'd like to start with Hentrenson. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Hentrenson. I'm from Denmark and I play a hunting method.
Very good. There's still hunters around, huh? So how was tier 13 for you as a hunter?
Uh, Not on my hunter, pretty much. Like, we were in such a bad place in the start. Like, we needed a lot of gear to actually do something, but you could run with one hunter in the raid. And with our warlock position, I ended up playing warlock rather than playing hunter, and one of the other hunters took the hunter role. Mostly just wait on Roger.
Yeah, you have quite a few strong hunters in your guild, so I could see that being a trick. So I think that's fairly common from talking to various guilds about how it was for hunters. So, but hey, probably different, completely different story next expansion. You guys will end up being the ones that get stacked. So, well, next we have Padmay. Hi, Padmay. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Padmay. I'm from Paris, in France. I love baguettes, and I used to play mage in the main roster of Method, and since the end of tier 13, I'm going casual.
Well, I'm glad you broke up the baguettes because that's really what I wanted to talk about. But aside, we'll set the baguettes aside for now. I'm glad you brought up the going casual. What made you decide to go casual? Because you've been raiding for a long time, and was that a difficult decision for you?
Well, basically, what made me going casual is that the current state of the world first race is really disgusting, I find, because yeah, now it's all about doing 40 LFR run, then can you do 8 normal 25-man run to spread the loot? Do you have 12 mages to do this encounter, or can you have 12 rogue for the next one, etc., etc.? I mean, it's just World First should be about gathering 25 best player in the world, go in the red and rape it, not just having to spread loot among people, blah blah blah, farm and farm and farm. And the other thing is the between patches, which we don't have right now because we're waiting for the expansion, having to run like 5 outreds to spread the loot for the next year. I mean, it's just before we used to play like 10, 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day for 2 weeks, and then just play 3 hours for 6 months. And now you have to play five evening out of 7 in a week, even during farming. And I don't want to do that, so I can't be in progress raiding anymore.
Well, fair enough, and thanks for mentioning that because we'll get into it a little bit later as well. Sort of the idea that the way that top tier elite raiding is sort of shifting based on some of the needs to sort of engage alts and sort of cross develop multiple characters. So, well, we're happy you could join us anyway because it's nice to get perspective of raiders as they go through different stages in their playing experience. Well, next we have Phlaryu or Flare. Hi, please do introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Phlaryu from Sweden, Stockholm to be more precise. Been playing World of Warcraft for 7 years, 3 out of those in Method. I'm part of the officer team and the healing team.
Very good. And I know, how long have you been an officer?
That's a good question. I was like sort of an officer back in ICC for a while. I can't remember exactly how long, it was a few months. But some real life stuff happened for me, and I decided to go back to normal member rank for a while. Came back after the Firelands progress was over. I went back to being an officer again.
Very good. And next we have Treckie. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Treckie, protection paladin from Sweden, southern part, and I've been in the guild for almost 2 years.
So I have to ask you, Treckie, is your name at all related to Star Trek?
Well, no, actually not, but I am a Star Trek fan.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I always find it interesting why people choose their names they do. And every time I see your name, I think of Star Trek. So it's hard.
Oh,
Did you think about that when you made it? Thought, oh no, because that's a nickname people give to people who like to watch Star Trek or follow it really closely, like fans.
yeah, but it's spelled with two Ks instead of CK, to be correct. But anyway, the name, I came up with the name long before I even started watching Star Trek. I was then Trek Mech, which is my name for my mage. And then I just shortened it when I rerolled my Paladin.
Very good. Well, although I will say that that does kind of confirm that you're a Star Trek fan. The fact that you knew to correct the spelling of the nickname of a Star Trek fan. So, all right. And last but not least, we have Valiane. Hi.
Hi, my name is Valiane. I play Shadow Priest, and I'm from Denmark.
And he likes
So,
baguettes.
we'll
No.
say, I mean, aside from our token Parisian here, who's been bold enough to play off the French language servers, and I will say, Padmay, it's quite rare to get French players in any EU English server guilds, never mind method. But would you say that you guys are fairly well represented in most sort of Nordic countries, or is it really quite a wide mix from all across the EU? And I'm going to throw that one to Flair since he's an officer.
You mean like
Your
different
geographical
countries?
distribution, yeah. Like, where would you say that most of your members are from? Are you mostly Scandinavian and Nordic, or is it sort of all over the place?
I'd say we're pretty well spread at the moment. There was a while when we had a lot of Danish people. We have quite a few Swedes, and I think I'd say a quarter at least would be like the Nordic part of the active rating team. But we definitely have a good spread right now.
And what would you say your sort of average age is of your raiding team?
20-ish, just hands down. We have a few people that are older, but most people around that.
And do you have any female raiders right now?
No.
Wow. Okay. For my just so for our listeners' benefit, I've had the opportunity to talk to Method quite a lot, and I've never gotten the impression from you guys that that's intentional. I'm guessing it's just a situation that you just don't have any right now. But
Yep.
has that always been the case, or have you actually had female raiders? I know you've had a few,
Yeah, we've had
like a
female
Tina.
raiders.
Mm-hmm.
I think there've been about 5 since I came here 3 years ago, but there's only been about 2 quality raiders that actually lived up to our standards. But unfortunately, yeah, they're not playing anymore.
Do you think, Flair, not to keep putting you on the spot, but I just wondered what you thought about this.
No worries.
Do you think that do you think it's just really hard for female raiders to just get support and the ability to kind of move up? We talk about this concept in English about a glass ceiling, the idea that you can look up and see a top level position in a company, for example, but you can't quite get there, that there's something in the way. And they've often used that to refer to people from minorities, like a woman, for example, trying to get to an executive job. And I suppose on some level you might say, well, for women in raiding, it's really hard for them to get to the top. They might not have as much time to learn, or someone to encourage them to get involved, or for various other reasons. Do you think that that's the case, especially with elite raiding, that it's just really hard to get females involved and kind of keep them interested? Like it's kind of a boys' club.
There's definitely something in there about it. I'm not sure if you would say elite rating in general. I think it might be gaming in general. But I think personally, I think it's a bit related to the whole thing with females in general in games, because yeah, there's a general attitude towards females. There's usually a lot of younger players, and when there's a girl present, they act differently. Some girls get affected by that, and yeah, I think some people don't really have the will as well to actually get towards the top as well. There's majority male players, but the percentage that actually are going up there to be elite traders are very small between males as well. And then because of the fact that there are fewer female players as well, there's naturally going to be an even smaller part of those who are up there as well rating.
Yeah, that seems consistent with my research as well, though I haven't focused specifically on the gender issues, I think. They've also found that women in general have less free time than men, so that does affect their ability to even engage in any leisure activity, never mind gaming. But yeah, it is kind of, I think the storylines and kind of the atmosphere of gaming in general is quite dominated by, I suppose, what would be considered interests of topics of interest to boys or to men. So yeah, do you think that that should be something that could change in the future? Hentrenson, I'm going to pick on you because you typed a little comment. Do you think that might change in like 10 or 15 years, that we'll just start seeing more girls get interested in playing games and things will change? Or do you think it's just generally something that may never change?
I don't know actually, because it kind of happens in like the early teenage years when computer comes around. I just think like girls in general have other topics that they like to focus on rather than gaming. But I think over the next like 10, 15 years there will be more girls, yes, but I don't think like in hardcore gaming, like in-game raiding or competitive, whatever other game it is, I don't think there'll come that many more girls because it's just not appealing to watch them. I think it's really a boys club. I don't think we'll see more. So yeah, I don't think they have the time and the will and the fact that it's pretty much a sausage party at the moment.
Yeah, oh, I guess we'll just have to see. But yeah, it does seem to be that way for now. So. Now, another question I wanted to ask you guys about, and Trekkie, I'm going to pick on you now. Because of the fact that you are so geographically spread with players from all different parts, and obviously your sort of language of choice for when you're raiding is English, how is that for you as a raider? And I know we've talked about this before, about the differences between playing in let's say, an all Swedish guild or playing in an EU English guild. And has that ever been a trouble or difficult for Method? And what's your perspective on the language issue?
Well, I did play in a Swedish-only guild before, so I know there's a language barrier. And honestly, for personally, I think it's really big, and I see lots of benefit in national guilds, so to say. But the strength still comes from having good players, and that's the only way you could have method with having an international guild. So
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think it's also I think a lot of people who don't know much about raiding or gaming, when I point out guilds like yours, they're actually quite fascinated by it. And I usually joke around saying it's a United Nations of raiding because it is very much so. So, and there's pros and cons both ways, but it's nice to see it. Also, I'm sure for all of you, you've made friends with people that you would never have met otherwise, probably. So, it's definitely makes it a bit of a smaller world. So, Valiane, let me just ask you a question. They were saying that earlier, some of the guys were talking about the fact that we have people from lots of different places, and there were a lot of Danish players. Now you and Hentrenson are both from Denmark, and do you still have a fair number of Danish players in the guild?
We have what? Me, Hent, and Kirsten, so currently we have 3 active raiders.
Sparkles, right?
Oh, yeah, and Sparkle, yeah, so 4.
Do you
Oh man,
think
Sparkle
now
will kill me for that.
there was I don't know how much you know about the history of like Nihilum, for example, and there was a bit of a
Yeah.
Danish contingent there, and it's a bit notorious, like a gang almost.
Yeah, it's a thing for Danes because it happened in some of my previous guilds as well, like the Danes ganging up.
And what's that
Basically,
about? Some sort of like Viking leftovers or
the guild
something?
I was in before I joined Immersion, like prior to being an Inner Sanctum, we were actually referred to as the Danish Mafia.
Okay, and why do you think that is, though?
Because when someone joined we didn't like, we went pretty hard on them, and it actually ended up, I think 2 times or so they quit.
Wow, so it's almost like you're kind of bullied. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know. Internet bullies, like, it's a wide term, but to some extent, yeah.
It's a first world problem, I suppose. So, I think, well, my impression, I should say, even though I've been I really am just joking there, is that there is a lot of jokes along country lines and sort of, I know we don't have any of our Greek method members in the room, but there's often jokes about the Greek members as well. So I suppose that's only natural. Now let's get into the fun thing, which is Tier 13. Tier 13 was a bit painful for a lot of the top guilds, and I know that Method was not spared the pain. Padmay, let me ask you first. Can you give me your individual impressions of how it was back in December, building up to the new expansion? So before it all hit with Tier 13, what was it like? What were you guys expecting to happen, and so on?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't 100% committed to the guild at that point because I had a lot to do with my studies, especially during the PTR and such. But I was following the streamings and private streamings during PTR and shit. But basically, as I said earlier, from a mage point of view, we had the sickest mage team ever and that anyone could have in the world. And with mage being so strong in this instance on every single encounter, we were pretty sure we had a pretty sick lineup. Like I remember from like a week or 2 weeks before the patch came out, we had some kind of a MMO champion red comp thingy for every boss, and there was like 5 or 6 mages on each bosses in the red comps, and yeah, we had a really strong roster, not only mage wise, but all the roster was pretty strong. And well, as you know, the band did a lot on the mantle in the team, but we were really before the ban. I think people were really psyched, and even during the LFR thingy, we were still having fun and laughing, and TS was cool. But the ban came, and yeah.
Yeah, the ban came. That's a good way to put it. It was a bit of a shock. Even me, who was sort of standing by and watching what was going on, I was very surprised, and I was even a little bit upset about it because I knew how many people it was affecting. And there was a lot of debate back and forth, which I know is a bit unusual. Hentrenson, how was it for you when those bans started coming through and you realised that it was just a matter of time before Method was going to get affected?
That was late night, like watching forums and someone said they were banned, and I was trying to like then, well, we were banned, like all at the same time. And I was like, what the fuck? Okay, we're gonna be back in like 3 days, and that was like, then the MMO post came out on MMO Champion, like forum posts that people have been banned for 8 days and shit, and we hadn't got our mails yet to confirm anything. We just knew we were banned. Then we got our mail and it said 8 days to everyone. It was like, what the fuck? Fuck this shit. And then it's like, what can we do about it? And everybody was like semi-angry, and it was like, it's just really shit because you're really set up for it, and then you're just completely smashed in the face and pretty angry because you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean I suppose that's what it is. It's like you've been given your sentence essentially, and you just kind of have to wait out the punishment. Now, one thing I wanted to ask, and I was going to ask you, Flair, because as an officer, there were decisions made by certain guilds to sort of put forward a point of view. And I know that also happened with Method. Sco chose to write a post a little bit about it, kind of giving it a bit of Method perspective into the bans and what had been going on. And there was a little bit of backlash to some of those. Some people feeling like it was only said because it was a way to look good for your sponsors and so on and so forth, which some other people didn't agree with, but that's kind of what was put forward as an opinion about why you guys decided to speak up. And could you just tell me a little bit about why you guys chose to say anything at all, and how you decided to react as a guild, and did that how do you feel about that now looking back?
Well, partially I'd say it's a bit to respond to the community, but mainly when we try to make those statements, I guess it's a bit, what do you call it? It's a bit wishful thinking, but basically that Blizzard gets a point of view from those who actually are investing a lot of time in this game and trying to put forward position that we're in, more or less. When you're in this race, when you want to compete for world first, and you end up in this situation more or less because of them bringing this bug, or not intentionally, but basically overlooking these kinds of bugs. So it's basically partially for the community, and partially actually to get it through to Blizzard.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, you could say nothing, which is always a choice, but I think it's hard when you're a guild that does have a lot of players that visit the site and a sort of a more public presence than the average guild. So it was definitely a learning experience, I thought. And I have to say, a few things that made me chuckle a little bit in the process was some of the little jokes that were going back and forward. And am I correct in my impression, Chucky, that some of the guys in Method were responsible for some of the little trolls that were sort of going back and forth? There was that very infamous the Olympics ice skating one. I'm pretty sure that was a Method guy. Am I right?
That was Nax, I think.
Naxe,
Yeah.
That might be
Actually,
one of the best ever.
Someone linked it on our forums without the names, and I asked Noxa to put the names of the guilds in there, and he uploaded it like a few hours later. It was hilarious.
Oh, it's classic. I mean, genius, really. And then there was the there was one of you guys just mentioned Hacksball on the chat channel, and we who did that one? Because that was pretty. Did you do that, Valiant? I swear to God, I don't know why, but I was laughing for hours. Every time I would see that, I would start to laugh, and I couldn't stop. It was just something about that particular one just made me chuckle. Probably because it was Hacksball. I don't know, but yes, I think that's what it was. I don't know, but yeah, they and I interviewed Blood Legion about this, and they thought it was all absolutely hilarious. They found it really funny. So, hopefully, not that I wish that we have another situation like the LFR ban again, but there's obviously room for a bit of banter and joking between the guilds. Do you guys ever talk to any of the American raiding guilds?
Yeah, from time to time. I actually started living in carrots in the US. I have it in vodka currently.
Oh, right. How's that been going?
Decent.
Do you have any sort of initial impressions of the difference between playing with Americans versus Europeans?
Not to generalize at all, but the pucks I've done on my low-level character so far has proved that Americans, at least the ones I've been playing with, are fucking horrible at this game compared to Europeans.
Okay. It might be limited to your experience, of course, and
Yes,
I realize you said that at the beginning, but yeah, that's interesting. I know they have a much bigger and widespread casual player base than we do in Europe, which might account for that. But pugging is always a bit of a tricky thing. And just out of curiosity, Hentrenson, how often do you play with people that you don't know, like do LFR or LFG or whatever? Do you ever do that?
Yep, all the time.
How is it?
For it's mixed experiences. It depends on how you queue. Like I queued with a Boomkin friend, and he queued up as a healer, so we would get fast in, and then halfway through they'd find out that he's not healing, and then they'd kick him and blame him for not healing, and that for the wipe reason on some trash or something, and then we would all get kicked and had to re-queue, and that repeated like 3-4 times. But we'd just do it for the lols, go around and do various stuff.
And we do it for the Connings.
Also for the Connings.
But not a single Conning has yet been given.
Neither has the vial been coming towards us.
Okay. So, well, one question about that, right? If I know I've been, put into a group with a guy from the guild method, it's probably pretty good for me to deduce that it's one of you guys, and I'll probably be feeling pretty nervous playing with you. Do you think you make people nervous?
No.
Not at all. Most people, when they see us, like, it happens sometimes that, oh my god, your method, you're so good. But most of the time, from my experience, they're just saying, you're nothing, you're just shit. And I've actually experienced on my main several times that Apparently, I'm just some alt in method. Some
Yeah,
casual.
that's what I was
Because you don't
told
have
by.
turning
That's what
though.
everybody tells me all the time as well. That you're an alt.
Well, I could be looking at my gear.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's funny too because your name is, indelibly linked to whatever guild you're in, and a lot of people, you want to make sure whoever wears the guild name is appropriate to that name. So I guess it kind of goes the other way around too. It's like you see a guild name and there might be an assumption. And I wanted to ask Trekkie, I wanted to ask you if you were to describe method to somebody that didn't know it, what words would you use to describe the guild?
Oh,
I
that's
know
a
I
tough
put you
one.
on the spot. I know, sorry.
I don't know really. It's there is a bit of a elitism maybe, but I think a lot of people are friendly towards other method members. But seen from an outside perspective, any top guild is probably easy to be seen as just douchebags or whatever. Especially in looking for raids because well we've run them like 200 times, so I think we know what we're doing. But
So you think you know how to raid now? Is that what you're saying?
at least in the position when you deal with, you have no idea who they are. That means looking for it. So yeah, I think we know what we're doing. People always insist that we don't. So
That's a shame. Does it matter to you, Trekkie, what people on your server think about the guild? Like, do you care about what server you're on, and do you, as a guild, engage in the other raiding, like other players on the server, the community? If there's even a community there, I mean, do
It's
you?
not possible in Saviors.
no,
No. Well, how come?
server is way too small. There's like 2 other guilds on the server, and yeah, like some pug with one of the other guilds, I think, or whatever. But there's not the community. There's basically 2 guilds and a lot of people you have never seen Stonewind before, more or less. If there was a big server, I'd expect a lot more, but that's not happening on Savius.
Was it always that way, or is that just recently?
I think it was worse in the beginning, and then it was better during Kata launch, and now it's just bad again. Don't know if everyone else agrees, but that's how I feel.
Are they I had a recent roundtable discussion about the drop in 25-man rating guilds. There's actually a very, very significant drop compared to, say, tier 10. 18 months ago, there was maybe one 25-man rating guild to every 3 10-man rating guilds, and now we've got one 25-man rating guild to 9 10-man rating guilds. So it's increased threefold, which is a big change. And I don't know if that's affected your particular server, but have you guys noticed that as well? Flare, are you aware of that at all? And do you have any opinion about the change in 25-man rating?
I wouldn't say I look for it specifically, but mainly when I've noticed it, it's been through the rankings, to be honest. Like when you're looking on progress lists, you generally start to see a lot of 10-man guilds popping up. I think pretty much come Cataclysm. And yeah, every tier that you progressed and new content came out, you saw more and more 10-man guilds doing well. So I just assumed naturally that, yeah, there were more 10-man guilds coming.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a quick look at your server, and you're right, you do have a pretty lean raiding scene. But what's most interesting is of the top 20 ranked guilds on your server, only one of them is a 25-man raiding guild, and that's you guys. So it's and actually, sadly, that's becoming more and more standard. Obviously, not going to be a 25-man raiding guild of your ranking necessarily, but yeah. And I'm wondering, I'm just doing a quick check to see how it looked last tier and the tier before.
I think it's mainly that when people decide to swap guilds, few take the choice to go from a 10-man to a 25-man. It's mainly people that is in a 25-man guild and decides they want to switch, and they choose a 10-man guild. So the 25-man guilds are slowly dying off, and more are creating 10-man guilds. Because it's easier to have a 10-man guild, and then there's incentive to have a 25-man guild because there's as much, or there's the same loot and the same stuff, and it's just easier managing 10 people.
I had a recent conversation, Arx was in that discussion from Paragon, and he was suggesting that for a lot of 10-man raiding guilds, 10-man raiding is a smoother experience from a game mechanic point of view. You know, it's a bit easier on the computers, and it can be a bit nicer to play.
Definitely.
Which makes it very interesting for me. Why do you think it is that you guys at the top have pretty much remained consistently 25? You haven't really seen a lot, and there have been a few cases of people downsizing, but they haven't really survived. Insidia was a good example of trying to try it at 10-man, and it just sort of folded, and they just, members just moved to other guilds, including a couple coming to you guys. So it doesn't seem to be the rating size of choice, at least for guilds that have been 25 before. So why do you think that is, that we've, got so many of the guys at the very top that have stayed at 25?
Because that's the way we've always rated, and it's like it's easier to recruit. Like you can easier have more of one class than you can in a 10-man or something if you get really good players in that class. And sort of the actual rate stacking is not as much, but it's just the recruiting on its own, I think, and those skills that are at the top have always been 25-man. And I think that's basically it.
It's basically because most of the people who see WoW competitively in the top rating has the point of view that 25-man is the real challenge. And compared to 10-man, it's not really desirable to do 10-man. It's so small and doesn't really feel like as epic as 25-man does.
You can also do a bit more cheesing in 10-man when it comes to encounter.
Yeah.
Some nifty stuff that requires some very heavy voice communication and relies on some few class mechanics and stuff that is very, very cheesy towards encounters that you can't do in 25-man but can do in 10-man.
Also the fact that you couldn't really raid competitively in 10-man prior to Cataclysm because it was two different instances really, like with different loot and most of the time different mechanics in some of the bosses.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose on one level you could slightly dispute that by saying you look at the Korean server raiding scene, and they definitely are more prone to 10-man raiding, but I think that's kind of still very much the only case where 10-man seems to be preferred. And of course, looking back at tier 13, that doesn't necessarily hold true because you've got kin raiders, having being a 25-man guild and winning the race. So it's a whole nother story. But yeah, I think it is very much community dependent. And it does seem, for the time being at least, you guys may be holding the flag up for 25-man raiding. As much as mainstream raiding seems to be dropping, you guys are still keeping it going. So I guess we'll see what happens.